whatever it is. There is an inevitable event. It's been forecast, it's been predicted, it's been fed to us in a slop trough of what they want us to believe will happen.
But they don't.
However, they don't actually have control over what happens. They only have control over the reaction, and it seems that no matter what they try to do to cause their desired reaction, it's going to have an opposite effect. But if I had to give it a name, I would say it's the awakening process. It's an evolution of consciousness that cannot, will not, and no matter what decisions or possibilities are injected into the equation, eventually it all resolves down to us all learning the truth and becoming aware of this massive dam of lies that has been built that keep us from knowing massive volume of information that we should otherwise possess.
Okay, well that's very, very monumental to be told that from a person in your perspective, who's had your background and your exposure.
Now, at first I thought it was end of the world. Now I see end of the world as end of their world.
Well said.
The biggest cherry on top of all this conversation would be a synopsis to say that if I could convince everybody out there that for all intents and purposes, what we believe to be true eventually becomes true. If somebody convinces us that a major disaster is going to happen in the very near future, a major disaster happens in the very near future. If we don't buy into that fear and accept that there's really nothing that we know is going to happen, and accept of whatever happens, that makes the convergence of the timelines happen as naturally as possible. Any attempts to try to go away from this one inevitable conclusion, which I again see as a new beginning, an end of this reality, the beginning of something that we can't even possibly understand based on the level of our beliefs currently. But when all that information comes flooding out, there's going to be no denying what's true and what's a lie or what's illusion.
When we come to this convergence, and again, you've seen, or the looking glass has seen, up to that point.
Now, let me say why I believe that it comes down to one inevitability, is because I was entrusted in getting it down to two possibilities. And I've heard both of those possibilities talked about in massive proportions, the good and the bad.
Okay, do you want to talk, so can you in one sentence say what the good was and the bad was, or are you able to do that?
To most easily put it to people,
I suppose.
One scenario is what most people would understand to be ascension, or an evolution of consciousness, that brings us out of the cocoon and turns us into a butterfly. Timeline 2 is some kind of major global catastrophe that drives most of us underground and leaves a few of us on top to fend for ourselves.
Very well put. Okay, so I would imagine, and you can...
But I would also like to point it out that they call Timeline 2, Timeline 2. It seemed very odd to me that even back then it was identified as not one. And that one didn't get talked about.
Okay, one is the one that involves what in essence would be ascension, or moving into, from the cocoon to the butterfly. Okay, but I believe, based on what you're telling me, that they would have used a lot of people like you that had a proclivity for being able to see the future, to be what is a sort of an advanced psychic remote viewer, whatever you want to call that, and looking glass, to posit these potential futures, to go up to that point and to view it, and that you're just one of many. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And back in 1991, when I began my little adventure in the military, I would say that it was pretty obvious that there wasn't very many of us. However, you go 20 years into the future, and you find out that it's coming to the point where there's a lot of people that have that ability, that are inherently realizing that ability, and are able, through some unknown extraordinary means, to develop that ability inside themselves without any outside help or assistance. And it's quite obvious that as far as advanced intellectual abilities, as far as simple intelligence levels, and cognitive skills of the human race has increased exponentially in the past 20 years. And people that were 10 years old in 1991 are now 30 years old and fully awake and conscious of this burning inside that says, I am a lot more than what I see in the mirror.
Absolutely. Okay. I do have a question in regard to what the military-industrial complex has been working on. Because with the knowledge that you say they have, assuming that they have this level of knowledge that you're talking about, right? In other words, of the timelines converging and the fact that there was going to be something. And I don't know if you saw the movie or the TV show Fast Forward. I mean, but there's been so many possible, scenarios in that regard. But one of the things that goes on is they are very busy building underground bases, supposedly underground cities. And so they seem to be hedging their bets for the negative timeline and putting their emphasis there. And would you say that that is because why would somebody want something negative to come true? Well, of course, the Illuminati have a program that they're working on in that regard. But basically, the sort of well-meaning military that just goes after contingencies, and is just working towards a future that they want to prevent or deal with when it comes. Can you explain why they have been hedging their bets to such a degree on the negative?
It's very simple. They're insane. And beyond insane, they have literally deluded themselves into believing that they can somehow manage to get away with what they're trying to get away with. There is a distinct lack of reality in that thinking.